The rain fell in thin, bitter threads over the dusty village road. Mud clung to her bare feet, and every step echoed the humiliation she'd endured. Ayla, 26, once radiant with laughter and life, now walked like a ghost. The same people who had celebrated her wedding 5 years ago now whispered behind their hands as she passed. She couldn't give him a child, they said. She's cursed Barren. Her husband's family finally sold her off, poor soul. Each word cut through her like a blade. But she didn't cry. Ayla had no tears left. Her family had traded her away a human life for debt to a man she'd never met. Widowed rancher rumored to live in the remote valleys beyond the mountain pass. She was told his name only once, Jonas Hale. Jonas was a name whispered with both respect and fear in nearby towns. A man who'd lost his wife in a fire. A man who owned half the valley but lived alone in silence. They said his eyes were colder than the mountain winds. Ayla's mother had clutched her hand before the wagon came to take her away. Be obedient, Ayla. He paid a fair price. Maybe you'll survive there. And that was it. No embrace. No love, just a transaction. The wagon that carried her rattled through endless hills until even the horizon forgot her name. When it stopped, she saw the ranch, Silver Creek Ranch, spread wide and lonesome under a storm-colored sky. Fences stretched as far as she could see, and a single horse stood under a gnarled oak, its breath steaming in the cold. Then she saw him. Jonas Hale stood on the porch, broad-shouldered, wearing a long coat darkened by rain. His beard was rough, his face marked by grief, and years of hard living. But his eyes steady, deep grey held something that silenced her fear for a moment. Not anger, not cruelty, just a kind of quiet ache. "You must be the one they sent," he said, his voice low, steady. Ayla lowered her gaze. "Yes, sir." He didn't speak for a long time. The wind whistled between them. "Come inside, before the rain drowns you." Inside the wooden house, everything smelled of pine and smoke. The walls were simple, but the silence was heavy. Ayla stood awkwardly near the door, shivering. Jonas set a kettle on the stove, his movements calm, almost gentle. "They told me you'd work the kitchen and tend the house." "That's all I need." She nodded, clutching her worn shawl tighter. "Yes, sir. I'll do what's needed." He turned to her then, studying her face. "You can drop the sir. I'm not your master." That startled her. No one had ever said that before. Not her husband. Not his family. Not even her father. Jonas poured her tea, his voice quieter now. "I don't care what they called you or what they think you can't do. You'll find no chains here, Ayla. Only work. And peace if you want it." For a heartbeat, she wanted to believe him, but she'd learned better than to trust kind words. Kindness had always been the start of new pain. He handed her the cup. Their fingers brushed. His hand was rough but warm. "Drink, you're shaking." Ayla took the cup, whispering, "Thank you." He nodded once and walked to the window, staring out into the rain. "The hills can be cruel," he said. "They break people who don't learn their rhythm. But they also heal the ones who listen." She didn't understand what he meant. Not yet. That night, she lay awake in a small room at the end of the hall. The wind moaned through the cracks in the wood, and thunder rolled over the valley. But for the first time in years, no one was shouting at her. No one called her useless or cursed. Just silence. Heavy, unfamiliar silence. She turned her face into the pillow and whispered to herself, "I am not barren. I am not broken." And somewhere in the house, she thought she heard a low, quiet hum. A man's voice, singing to the storm. It was Jonas, a song of loss and hope. The sound wrapped around her like a promise she didn't dare believe in. Morning came with pale sunlight and the scent of wet earth. Jonas was already outside, working with the horses. Ayla watched him from the window, the way he moved with purpose, steady and strong. The ranch hands respected him but kept their distance. There was grief in him, but also a strange peace. She spent the day cleaning the old house. Dust danced in the air like forgotten ghosts. On the mantel she found a photograph. Jonas with a woman and a little boy. His wife and son. Their faces glowed with laughter, but both were gone now. The frame was cracked, as though he'd once thrown it, then couldn't bear to throw it away. That night, Jonas found her standing by the fireplace, staring at the photo. "They were my life," he said quietly behind her. "Fire took them 3 winters ago." Ayla turned, guilt flushing her cheeks. "I'm sorry, I shouldn't have." He lifted a hand. "You don't have to be sorry. People here speak of me like I'm half dead. Maybe they're right. I buried everything I loved." Ayla's eyes met his. "And yet you bought me. Why? He hesitated, the firelight flickering across his face. Because the world owes both of us a second chance. Maybe not in the way people expect. I don't need a wife to give me children, Ayla. I just need someone who remembers how to be alive. The words struck something deep inside her, a warmth she hadn't felt in years. She looked away quickly, blinking back tears. I don't know if I remember how, she whispered. Jonas gave a faint smile. Then we'll both learn. Outside, the rain had stopped. The mountains stood silent and vast, and in the hush of that moment, Ayla felt something. She thought she'd lost forever the small, trembling beginning of hope. The frost melted slowly across the hills that spring, and the ranch began to breathe again. Each dawn, Ayla rose with the light, her shawl wrapped around her shoulders, her hands steadying a life that had once been shattered. The kitchen smelled of warm bread and fresh herbs. The horses neighed softly as Jonas worked in the yard, his voice low and calm, a rhythm that soothed even the wildest stallion. Weeks passed, but the silence between them had changed. It was no longer a wall. It was a language. Ayla began to understand his quiet ways, and Jonas learned to read her unspoken thoughts. When she laughed, even softly, he looked at her as though the world had just remembered how to bloom. One afternoon, Ayla found him mending a broken fence near the east pasture. The wind tugged at his hair, and the sun caught in his grey eyes. She hesitated, then knelt beside him, holding the wooden rails steady. "You work too hard," she said softly. He smiled faintly. "Work keeps the ghosts quiet. And when the work is done," he looked toward the horizon, the distant peaks glowing in gold. Then I tried to listen to the living again. Something in his tone stirred her heart. She wanted to tell him how he had already given her a reason to live again, how his quiet kindness had rebuilt pieces she thought were gone forever, but the words tangled in her throat. That evening, the ranch glowed under the soft blush of sunset. Ayla planted flowers near the fence, tiny shoots of color against the gray soil. Jonas watched from a distance, then walked over, wiping his hands on a cloth. "Didn't think anything could grow here," he said. "It can," she replied. "It just needs a little faith." He knelt beside her, his large, calloused hands touching the same earth. "Then maybe there's hope for both of us." Days turned into months. The ranch began to hum with new life. Cattle grew strong. The soil softened under spring rain, and laughter, hers and his, began to echo between the hills. Ayla no longer feared silence. It had become her peace. Sometimes Jonas would play an old tune on his harmonica, and she'd hum along while cooking by the fire. Their lives had fallen into an unspoken harmony. Then one morning, a letter arrived, sealed with the mark of her old village. Ayla's hands trembled as she opened it. Her former husband had remarried, it said. Her family demanded she return. They claimed the rancher had already got his worth. The words stung like salt in an open wound. When she showed Jonas the letter, she expected anger or dismissal, but he only studied her face quietly before saying, "They still believe they own you." Ayla nodded, tears burning her eyes. "Maybe I should go back. That's what they expect." Jonas stepped closer, his voice firm but gentle. "Ayla, listen to me. You are not a debt. You are not a burden. You are a woman who deserves to be free. If you go, go because you want to, not because they think they can claim you." She couldn't hold back anymore. The tears fell freely, her hands trembling as he took them into his. "Why do you care so much?" she whispered. Jonas's gaze softened. "Because I know what it's like to lose everything you love. And I won't let you lose yourself, too." That night, she sat by the fire long after he'd gone to bed. The photograph of his lost family still rested on the mantel, but beside it now stood a small vase of wildflowers she'd picked from the field. She realized then that healing wasn't about replacing pain, but about filling the empty spaces with gentleness. The next morning, she found Jonas on the porch watching the sunrise. He turned as she approached. "You've decided?" he asked quietly. She nodded. "Yes, I'm staying." A slow smile broke across his face, a smile that reached his tired eyes. "Then so will I. Truly this time." He took her hand, rough fingers meeting delicate ones, and for a moment the valley seemed to pause. The light washed over them, both soft and golden. "I don't need children to make this house full," he said. "I need laughter. I need peace. I need you." Her heart trembled, tears glimmering like dew. "You've given me both, Jonas. You gave me a home when the world gave me nothing." The wind whispered through the blooming fields, carrying the scent of spring. For the first time, Ayla didn't feel like a woman who had been sold or forgotten. She felt seen, wanted, and cherished. The mountains that once stood as walls now looked like protectors, standing guard over their fragile, beautiful peace. That night, they stood together under a sky thick with stars. Jonas slipped his arm around her shoulders, and she leaned into his warmth. The fireflies danced across the pasture like sparks of memory. This valley was dying, Jonas said softly, but you brought life back. Ayla smiled. Maybe we brought it back together. And as the moon rose high, the ranch, once cold and empty, pulsed with quiet light. Not a story of rescue, not a story of ownership, but a story of two broken souls who learned that love isn't about what you can give, it's about what you can heal.